A very warm welcome. At Hyde Park tonight, we will discuss the tourism industry, the way forward for Sri Lanka's biggest or rather a major remittance earner for the country, the industry, where the industry goes from here, 6 weeks after the deadly Easter Sunday attacks in Sri Lanka. And to discuss this, we believe we've invited just the right person. A very warm welcome, Mr. Kishu Gomes.
Thank you very much.
You're now only heading the Sri Lanka Tourism Promotion Bureau. You gave up your authority over the Sri Lanka Tourism Development Authority. This was shortly after the attacks.
Yes, the reason being that on both fronts, the work volume obviously multiplied by many folds. So one person trying to sort of deal with two would have taken a longer time for the country to be able to bounce back. So we had a nice discussion with all relevant stakeholders and finally made the decision that I would be the in charge of promoting the country, managing the brand, trying to get the traction from the rest of the world, basically taking Sri Lanka out to the world and promoting it, and Development Authority had to basically take care of the regulatory aspects of tourism.
But given Sri Lanka's situation for years, we've seen that tourism development needed a lot of attention. Yes. But I believe when you were given this opportunity, you call this an opportunity to serve the nation.
Sure.
But do you think at this time to give away the Development Authority was the right decision?
Well, in the short term, yes, because product development, as you said, is key, no question about it, because it's all about competitiveness, right? How do we create a competitive tourism destination? So that's where Development Authority comes into play. But having said that, given the circumstances we are in, given that our brand is now kind of bleeding, in order to revive that and to reposition it and to market it, you need a lot of time and lot of thinking time, lot of execution time, all of that. So I think from that perspective, it's the right decision, because you should not be thinking about yourself or just the industry, but broadly the country. What is right for the country? What is right for the country is obviously adding more muscle behind strategy execution and ensuring that we are on a faster track in order to be able to recover.
Let's talk about what is right for the country at this moment. Sri Lanka was shook by these attacks. Yes, 6 weeks after, we're still trying to come to terms with what really happened. And this has been a time where we had renewed interest as a destination. And we also have some new branding going on and a lot of attention on the country. But here, in a moment, in a string of attacks, everything changes for the worse for the country. But how did you feel? I'd like to start off, because you had just taken office let's say 3 months ago.
You're right. It was a huge shock, and then it took a while, for me to be able to comprehend it. Having so much, experience working for the largest multinationals, in the world.
For 33
and having
years.
33 years, and having been the CEO of one of the largest, listed entities in Sri Lanka, it was a shock because it came in at a time nobody anticipated anything of this sort, right? But just over a couple of hours time, I took a lot of power into me and wanted to react to it in the best possible manner. So by 2 p.m., 3 p.m., I had the strategy
so
very
you were not
clearly
scared about what lies ahead. You were not worried, because the entire tourism industry, this is actually the lifeline of thousands in Sri Lanka.
Yeah, so attack took place around 9 o'clock, as we all know, and I was in office by 9:30. The moment I heard it, the first thing I did was to go to office, and I parked my vehicle. I didn't have the driver on that day. Parked my vehicle and crossed over to Cinnamon Grand, and I just spoke to a few people, and then from there started moving, went to all 3 hotels, and in fact went to Kochikade church as well. Obviously while going, talking to people, coordinating with people, got back into office, called all the right people into office, and some of the industry stakeholders too came in, and by 3:30, we had a good meeting, and at the meeting, we had a lot of big personalities, and Honorable Minister was there as well. But I had the opportunity of basically conducting the entire meeting, and at that meeting, I basically described as to how we need to respond to the challenge and what next steps that we need to follow, all of that. So I was prepared, just within 2 to 3 hours time.
The corporate Kishu coming into play.
And what happened to the country is very, very unfortunate. Shouldn't have happened, but it happened. But if you ask me, I'll tell you, I like the challenge.
You are always someone who likes to take the challenge. What were your strategy? What really ran in your mind at the time? You said you brought together industry stakeholders, you chaired this meeting, you had a strategy in your mind.
Okay.
What did you want to do?
So it had a few steps. First thing was to take care of the guests who were already in the country. So in that, obviously, we had so many people, dying. So we had to sort of, look into some of those needs. And then those who got injured, they were taken to 4 hospitals, General Hospital, a larger number, and then to 2 private hospitals, and another public hospital in Kalubovila. So obviously, we had to deal with the hospitals. So first thing we did was we went to all these hospitals, and at least the government hospitals, and we made an offer. We said, if you're not too happy with the level of comforts and medical attention you're getting, we will transfer you all to any private hospital you want at our own cost.
Right.
But in Indeewari, we must be very, very happy with the level of service of these public hospitals. Not a single foreigner tourist wanted the transfer. We kept on talking to them over 3-4 days. Not a single individual wanted a transfer, because they were very well looked after by the public hospital staff. Plus, the medical attention was at its best. So that was one. And then obviously taking care of the security of all the hotels, and then looking into the needs of the 3 hotels that came under attack. So those were the initial priorities. And then, of course, beyond that, we had to manage communication. What do we tell the rest of the world? How do we message it? And in the modern world, everything gets out as and when they happen. So therefore, you have no reason to hide. Even if you have a reason to hide, you can't hide it. It's all there. It's all seen, visible, very transparent. So how do we then sort of, manage those sentiments? So we had a huge role to play there. So immediately we spoke to an ad agency and got their support to do a kind of an initial PR campaign, communication campaign, getting the right messages, using the right mediums, taking those messages to the rest of the world, and obviously doing right communication here locally as well. So priorities kept changing as we progressed.
As the situation kept developing.
Yeah. So we had to sort of change gears and be focused on the priorities at the given time.
Right. I think what the corporate world, those who know about you, likes and they admire about you is the level of focus that you give to a certain issue. You were mentioning about the way that hospital staff, everyone, all services came together to respond to this emergency. But how did you see the response of the politicians, of the political authority at the immediate aftermath of these Easter attacks, especially concerning tourism, and how we save and tell the world that we have something in place to protect our visitors?
the entire nation saw the reaction of the politicians, and the public express their point of view, and they obviously gave their feedback through various mediums. And reflecting back, I think we should have handled the situation in a much better way. Some of the initial things that were done, the way they were done, weren't right, and that actually led to a situation where there were more doubts being created than diffusing the issue at that point of time.
So does this mean we created more chaos post-attacks? Yes, the attacks itself was a major blow to the nation, but then with the comments and the way they acted, politicians especially, we in the media, we constantly broadcast and telecast certain statements made. But what kind of damage has this caused? I mean, you engage with these authorities and agencies on a daily basis trying to revive this industry, in the promotion aspect especially.
Well, I mean, from our perspective as tourism, having basically spoken to the military and military intelligence, we were very confident that situation was going to be brought under control just over a couple of days. So we had confidence, coming from them, and using the substance we got from them, I guess we said the right thing. But some other stakeholders, kept on doubting what was going on, and creating more ambiguity, creating a kind of an environment within which there would be more doubts than certainty. So those led to undesirable situation, which obviously as tourism we had to respond to.
Were you angry? Were you actually upset over the way things were?
I guess the entire country was angry. Not just ourselves, and we had to, in fact, respond to the local people here as well. A lot of people asked us as to why so-and-so said what he said. Why didn't he say the way he said it? Some people said the right thing, but not, in the right tone. The body language was not aligned. It was misaligned. Facial expressions were not aligned. There were a lot of issues from a public relations standpoint. So obviously they shouldn't have happened.
Just as much as we have to revive the industry, I think the tourism agency has to also save face in terms of the damage that was caused. But again, I'd like to ask you, has there been any support from the politicians in order to go towards this envisaged?
Well, support has been there right from the beginning, but being a government entity, the processes you got to follow. I didn't see a situation where a country could respond to a calamity of this nature using a different process, given the seriousness of the issue. And it's the same process that you have to follow. When it comes to procurement, as far as tourism decisions are concerned, it takes about 40 days to for you to be able to sort of go through the process to obtain all the approvals and to execute it. So in a situation of this nature, you can't be spending that much time. So this country, should have a system when dealing with, this kind of calamities and emergencies, where one can fast track or follow a different process to be able to make the decisions faster in order to deploy mitigating actions.
But these hotels, large, high-end hotels were targeted during these attacks, and we saw some of the high-end tourists, their families, some of the wealthiest people of the world had their families in Sri Lanka, and they were victims of this. How are you happy with the kind of security, the assurance we give to these high-end hotels? Because certain statements, as we talk about political statements, they came out saying no, we can't be providing security to all hotels because that's their responsibility if they do make money. But this obviously, I believe, went in as this was translated negatively as a message.
Sure, it received the response it should have received. That statement should have been made, and it is the accountability of the government to ensure that every single place, be it a tourism location or otherwise, to provide safety and security. So it was a very bad statement that was made by the person who made it.
The PR campaign. As you said, you looked at how we go forward beyond this, what's happened in Sri Lanka. It's just, we hear news about the PR campaign just being approved and the global marketing plan is approved.
Yeah, PR campaign is a proposal that we submitted immediately after the attack, and it took this many weeks.
6 weeks.
To get it approved because cabinet approved process itself
was this plan, the framework itself, did it need urgent implementation?
It needed urgent implementation, no question about it. It should have been implemented 3 days after the attack. But as I said, being a government entity, you still have to follow the same process. Cabinet approval process is the shortest, one can follow in order to get something approved. If we were to follow the normal, procurement process, it would have taken, 40 days.
But
this time,
in an emergency as this, did you not request authorities that they meet earlier? Because this is Sri Lanka, this is the third largest and fastest growing industry of Sri Lanka.
So from my side, I did what I could, within my authority. I went to the extent of, doing a cabinet paper draft. Obviously, the cabinet paper per se is done by the ministry secretary, but I sat with the ministry officials to write the document, and that's the extent to which I played my role. But again, there are translations you have to do. There are certain protocols that you got to follow. So the cabinet approval was just received just 2 days ago. Having this proposal being taken through, that process, which is the shortest route one can use in order to get anything approved. So this is the 6th week after the attack, and now we have to obviously come up with a refreshed PR plan, because some of the sentiments, the negative sentiments have already been addressed through other mediums. So now PR campaign will have to take a different shape in order to basically raise the level of confidence amongst all the targeted countries, and then obviously with the global marketing agency being appointed to a global marketing agency, as the sentiments get improved, they will kick in with the marketing campaign, in order to excite the entire world, to inspire the target audience to come take a look at Sri Lanka once more.
When you say PR campaign, and then you'll have to actually have additions now, does this mean this will also have to go in for approval?
No, actually together with the PR campaign, the advertising proposal was also approved. So therefore...
any changes do not need further approval?
No, not really, not from the cabinet. There will be some internal approval processes that we have to still go through, but those are not issues. Those are within our control. So
considering the fact that it has taken 6 weeks for an approval of a campaign that needed to be implemented immediately after these attacks. But Mr. Gomes, also, let's talk about the global agency that you're recruiting. How competent are they?
Well, this is a global agency. I can now mention the name as well, given that it has been approved by the cabinet. It's JWT. JWT is one of the largest global agencies in the world. They are the ones who did the So Sri Lanka identity entity work as well. So they understand the tourism brand in Sri Lanka. They understand global tourism industry. They've done enough research. So therefore they'll be able to make a kickstart. But obviously we're not making the start in a normal environment. It's a very different environment within which we have to now play the game. But I cannot think of any better agency than JWT, given that JWT has already spent so many years in studying the global tourism industry, Sri Lankan tourism industry, and done the work they have done. So from that perspective, and it is for 6 months only, Indeewari. So what I intend doing is let JWT start on this job. And 2 months into it, we will, go through a global tender once again to select an agency for the next 2 to 3 years' time. So that gives us 4 months for us to be able to finalize another global agency to take us forward into the next 3 years.
So they will continue to promote Sri Lanka after the 6-month period that JWT
JWT, unless otherwise they get re-elected as the long-term partner, will end their term in 6 months.
How much are we talking about in terms of this particular PR campaign?
Right. So for the PR campaign, we are going to spend 415 million rupees, and for the global advertising campaign, 500 million. So both put together, 915 million rupees is what we will invest.
And the return that you envisage?
Returns, some of the returns will be qualitative, some will be quantitative. In terms of quantitative ones, obviously we want to get back to the level we were at. In 2018 we had 2.3 million tourists coming in. So doing 2.3 during this year, repeating the same number this year may not be possible, or will not be possible, I must say that. But at least 2 months from now, 3 months from now, if we can start recording the average that we've been recording during last year corresponding period, then that will be a good achievement for the next 6 months time. And then come next year, obviously we will have to look at further growing the numbers in order to reach the ideal numbers we were chasing prior to the attack.
Several countries have softened their travel advice on Sri Lanka. Is this also an ongoing effort by your end, including the government? And of course, the security forces are doing majorly contributing to this by assuring us at hand that there is security on the ground. But still, we see that this advice continues, although it's not as harsh as earlier. How would you work about this?
Okay, so it is a collective effort. From our side as tourism, I visited few embassies and high commissions together with the Honorable Minister, and I also contacted few other ambassadors and high commissioners. So that was very, very fruitful. And whenever we went with a senior military intelligence officer from the Sri Lanka Army, and they were prepared to make a compelling presentation. And these presentations went very well, and the leaders of all these missions were very, very happy with what they heard. But of course, they had other concerns as well in terms of systems we have in place, the network we have in place, some of those things, very sensitive things. But it is through that effort that we managed to convince all these countries to soften the travel advisories. So far we have countries softening the travel advisories, and we're being able to get that done just over 1.5 months, which is an excellent achievement by any standard.
Right, and I believe you have news of more countries that are willing to go ahead and relax their travel advice to their citizens.
Yes. So, I mean, we needed this trend to start, and it has now started. And all the big countries have, already relaxed. US, UK, Germany, India, China. I mean, they are large geographies as well. Sweden, Switzerland. So, all the big countries have relaxed it. So, with that, I'm sure over the next couple of weeks' time, everyone else will, either soften or withdraw their travel advisories. And when some countries soften them, they said this advice is, just for several weeks, meaning that, at the end of that period, they will, further revise it. That revision can only be positive.
China, especially, is a target country where we are promoting and marketing our destination to the vast Chinese tourist opportunity. But with the travel ban and then the advisories, and now they've softened, what sort of change are we seeing? Because that will really hurt our numbers if we have Chinese tourists decline in them.
In China, we've been actually experiencing a decline even before the attack. Reasons can be many, but that's just a very, very slight magnitude decline that we've seen. But it's a large geography, almost 1.3 billion population. So small percentage increase there would mean large numbers for us. Right. So obviously from that perspective, it's an important country, and for us, second largest country. India is number one with almost 460,000 tourists, and China in 2018 was about 270,000. So second largest geography. So with them relaxing, I'm sure, and also with our hotels making various offers, and even to foreigners, you now offer 50% discounts,
right.
as much as
60,
65, 70%, and this is free, that is free, on top of these huge discounts given. So obviously tourists in places like China and India do respond to these enhanced value propositions, so they get tempted, and we get tempted as well. We know the natural human behavior. So with that, I'm sure they will start coming in large numbers, and then just over a period of time they will forget the fact that there has been a bomb attack and things will be normal.
There is renewed interest in Europe, especially the United Kingdom, if I'm not mistaken. Are we looking at a target in terms of attracting a larger European tourist component?
From a strategic perspective, Europe is very important because that's where the margins are, and in fact UK is the third largest geography for us. UK also send us about 250,000 tourists per annum, and they spend on an average about 10 days per visit, as opposed to an Indian or Chinese spending 4 to 5 days. So from every aspect, Europe is more important, and so we have a marketing plan in which we have different activities to be carried out, some very big activities, some small activities, in order to keep the brand alive in those markets. From now to end of the year, we have 55 events happening, 35 plus travel shows, almost 20 road shows, and about 10 consumer engagements. These are all international events that take place. So we are taking part at all these events, and other than that, if there are countries where we will not have anything planned as per the annual marketing plan, and those are big countries, important countries, we would obviously come up with a schedule, new one, in order to be able to cover those markets over the next 2 months' time. So we've looked at all possible activities and strategies in order to try and get the numbers back.
Tourism, the industry itself accounted for $4.4 billion US of foreign exchange during 2018 alone and contributing 4.9% to GDP. This is very important, especially when we talk about the growth in terms of our economy. But revenue-wise, what are we looking at, Mr. Gomes? Where do we go from here?
Okay, so we had a target of reaching 5 billion during 2019, but now with the issue we're battling with, 5 billion will not be possible. But you know, based on my own assessment, you know, looking at the overall economy of the country, looking at other revenue generators or generations, I believe that you know, if we are unable to take this level from current 4.5 to 10 million over the next 5 years' time, we may not be able to achieve the economic goals that we have set for ourselves. The reason being that number one revenue generator for the country is foreign remittances, and it has been declining over the past couple of years. It's around 7 billion now, right. And second being apparel exports is hovering around 5.5. And that industry is being threatened by a few countries like Vietnam to Myanmar to Bangladesh and some of the other countries, and it has also been taking a hit. And as opposed to those two, tourism has been steadily growing over the past 3 years, and globally tourism industry is growing at around 4.5 to 5%. And relative to that, in 2018 we grew the industry by over 10%. So obviously, seeing our own performance, we have the ability, the capacity, the capability to keep growing the industry by over 15%. So if we do so over the next 5 years' time, reaching 10 billion revenue target will not be hard.
You'll be sticking around?
Well, whether I'm here or not, if the country tourism has the right strategy and there is political support and you have the right people to take the lead, it is still doable, given that industry is pretty strong. Right, because industry itself is doing a lot of work. We have some huge local brands that are basically talking to the rest of the world as well, mind you, on their own. So you have to have someone leading in this effort, who can complement the efforts of the industry. So that is what is required. So I'm sure it'll fall into place.
But what we lack in not just in tourism is that we don't have consistent policy framework. But are you looking at a strategy that could be consistent regardless of government change or change of political camp?
Yeah. So consistency has been an issue, not just now, but over the past several decades. Everyone has been talking about it. We are still battling with that issue, which is true. As far as tourism is concerned, I'm occupying this seat today. But this has to be a permanent position, and I won't be that permanent man. I must, be very honest.
Why are you a political appointee?
Well, no. I mean, I took up this position to serve the nation because I had worked for multinationals for 33 long years, and I was taking a break, and that is the time at which this invitation came from the industry, and I said no to it. Not just once, few times, but then they kept on talking to me, and then finally, having seen the strategic importance of the tourism industry for the country, as a person who stepped down from a multinational to be able to do something bigger for the country, I thought it's nothing but right that I took up this position. So with that intention only I took it up, but that is to revive the industry and come up with a strategy that can take the tourism industry forward. So I would certainly do that during my time, but I have other plans.
So you really don't have plans to stick around for too long?
No, as long as I'm given the opportunity to perform, do the right thing, I will stick around. But if you ask me whether I'm going to be here for the next 2 years, I will say no.
Why so?
No, for many reasons, it has to be a permanent position, as I told you. I would like to see Tourism Promotions Bureau and the Tourism Development Authority having two permanent chairmen. That's the right thing, and a permanent managing director for the Promotions Bureau as well, because the continuity is important, and without that, you will not be able to compete against other nations. In Indeewari, we are only talking about the crisis, how we can bounce back, but there is a bigger issue outside of that. That is the level of competition in the tourism industry across the entire world. We have these beautiful products, true enough, but we are not the only country that has a similar product portfolio. Other countries also have. So it's all about how you position how you develop your products to start with, and how you brand them, how you position your brands, and how you communicate your brands to the target audience. So one person coming, staying for 1 year, 1.5 years, or 6 months doesn't help the industry, and that's wrong. Not just tourism industry, even the other industries where the task is similar. What you have to do is similar. If it is a commercial entity, I think it should be permanent positions. I don't believe in these kind of appointments for organizations of this nature.
A lot of people lost their livelihood following these attacks. Some of them are still grappling with trying to find work, but we're talking about a formal tourism industry and the informal sector of this industry. What is your view on this? How do we bridge this gap?
Well, if you look at the central bank figures, central bank will say in the tourism industry we have about 400,000 indirect and direct employers, right? But I totally disagree with that figure, because with this issue striking us, we've seen so many lives being negatively impacted, right? You go to the street, the person who sells king coconut will say, we have lost volume. You go to a fish market will say we have no business. Right? Poultry farms are complaining about it, and you go to any area, the lives are being impacted. So my estimate is that there is at least 2 million people indirectly depending on this. When I said indirectly depending, without tourism they can't survive. That's my definition for it. How many are indirectly impacted? Impacted the entire nation. Because when the tourism revenue is stalled, or pipeline goes dry, it creates so much economic issues. Banks are struggling, the financial sector is struggling, and so many issues in the periphery as well. So tourism is everyone's business from that perspective.
How do we look at if the central bank says 400,000 only, but there is a larger group that is dependent, even our gross domestic product, a significant amount of the development is contributed through tourism. But as somebody who has always proven through a vision-led operation, you have always had a strategy led by vision. Your turnaround in terms of a company that you took over into a household brand, I remember saying this before. How would you do this to our tourism industry? Because you're very passionate about working for your mother nation.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, with right strategy being implemented at the right time, and with a collective effort from all stakeholders, I've no doubt that we can bounce back better than ever before. Because as I said, the industry is very, very strong. We have, great marketeers at the industry level. The industry does better marketing than Tourism Promotions Bureau. If you look at the last several years, we have some super brands. We have some brands that are, one can say, stronger than the Sri Lanka tourism brand. I don't want to mention names here, we all know. So that's the level of strength we have in tourism in Sri Lanka. So all what we need to do is to bring all these strengths together and create mega power and market it aggressively, for which the industry and the Tourism Promotions Bureau, Development Authority need everyone's support coming from the government and everyone else. So tourism being such a competitive industry, tourism should be able to make independent decisions within a certain framework. It used to be Tourism Board, now it's Tourism Promotions Bureau. It's not a department, so why can't the government have some different processes so that tourism will be able to respond to some of the challenges fast enough?
You said the industry is strong enough, stakeholders, the agencies, but is there political will, not particularly talking about the government, but do you see a wider consensus on developing this industry?
No, I mean, while the industry is strong, I also have seen that they are also not working together. Bringing them around one table and having consensus has not been easy. I can understand the reasons for it. That has not been the culture. So we need to create a culture within which the industry will work together. The hoteliers working with the travel agents and vice versa, and then across other groups as well. So that culture has to be created, and for us to be able to create that culture, there has to be somebody on top who will pave the way, show the way, and get them to do it, and that takes and
it's great to hear of your optimism and the positiveness that you have for the industry and the country itself. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for the opportunity.
On our show at Hyde Park. We had with us the chairman of the Sri Lanka Tourism Promotion Bureau, Mr. Kishu Gomes, who recently gave away his other position of being the chairman of Sri Lanka Tourism Development Authority to solely look into and head the Sri Lanka Tourism Promotion Bureau in the aftermath of the Easter Sunday attacks that shook Sri Lanka. We'll join you again with another episode at Hyde Park.